slides and recordings afterwards, so you can take a look at them later. Or if you want to wait for your school itself to start teaching it, you can wait for that and then go through these again, help you with your revision later. Okay? So let's go on to our first topic, the cell cycle and meiosis. So let's first talk about the cell cycle. What is it? It is a series of stages where a eukaryotic cell grows and divides. So if you guys remember what eukaryotic is from our first lesson a few weeks ago, a eukaryotic cell basically means a cell that has a nucleus, right? The other sort of opposite is prokaryotic, where pro sort of means no nucleus. So prokaryotic cells, on the other hand, did not have a nucleus, among other things like double membrane bound organelles, things like that. But the main thing is that eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, okay? And the cells in eukaryotic organisms, they go through this thing called the cell cycle, where basically there's a lot there's a series of growing and divisions. So this is a picture over here on the right side that basically shows what the cell cycle kind of looks like. So it looks quite confusing, but don't worry, we're going to break it down. So you can see basically it sort of starts, let's say, from G0, then goes on to G1, then over here it's not labeled, but basically this section in green, light green, is called S, and then you've got G2 and then M. Okay, so over here, the cell cycle is split up into actually two broad bits, okay? We've got a cycle here. So we start with interphase. Interphase and mitosis. Mitosis is this red bit here, okay? It's made up of four stages that we'll go through really quickly later. You don't really have to know it for your GCSEs, but it's good to understand. If you continue with biology in A-levels, you will learn this much later on. But just to quickly go over it. So mitosis is one part of the cell cycle, and basically everything else is considered interphase, okay? So G, in these three cases, 0, 1, and 2, refers to growth. G stands for growth. So there's growth 0, 1, and 2 phases. And then this S phase that's not labeled, it stands for like synthesis, I believe, okay? So all the growth and synthesis phases combined are called interphase. So when the cell is not doing mitosis, it is in the interphase part of the cell cycle. So yes, as it mentions here, basically during the interphase bit, you don't need to know each section, okay? I repeat, you don't need to know each section for your IGCSEs. Okay, what happens basically is you just need to know is that cells grow during this time, okay? Cells grow the organelles, which are the bits inside cells. They basically replicate, and there is DNA replication as well. Replication just means it duplicates itself, okay? Okay, and then mitosis is basically the bit where the cell actually divides. So the entire interphase is preparing the cell for mitosis, okay, which is when the cell actually divides. And what's important to know about mitosis is that the cell divides, one cell divides into two genetically identical diploid cells. Now that's a lot of big words. These are all very important key terms for your exams. Let's break it down. So one cell, and it basically divides into two. Okay, hopefully that is very easy to understand. Now these two cells, okay, that come from this one cell are called daughter cells, okay? And these daughter cells are genetically identical. It's kind of like twins. They're basically exactly the same. Now, that's what it means. Diploid cells, it says over here in brackets, this is a bit more of a confusing term, means two complete sets of chromosomes, one from each parent. Okay, don't worry, we're going to go through this in 1 second, what I mean. Okay, so mitosis, okay, in a normal human, we all have 46 chromosomes in each and every one of our cells. And you can think of the 46 chromosomes. Chromosomes are the genetic material, okay, within the nucleus of our cells. So the 46 chromosomes can also be thought of as 23 pairs of chromosomes, so basically 23 times 2. And the reason is because we get 23 from our moms and 23 from our dads, okay? And that's what makes us. And basically what happens in mitosis is that you get your 46 chromosomes in the cell. Okay, in replication basically means duplication in this case. So you times 2 and you end up with 92 chromatids, but still 46 chromosomes. I will explain that in a little bit. Don't be too confused by that, okay? Basically, it's chromatids are also genetic material. They just look slightly different, okay? It's just a terminology kind of thing. But basically, what we just need to know is that during mitosis, not during the mitosis bit, during the interphase bit for mitosis, there's replication of the genetic material. Remember during the S phase we were talking about over here, this DNA replication bit, okay? It's not during mitosis, but it's to prepare for mitosis. It's during the interphase bit. Then during mitosis itself, the chromosomes, okay, after you've basically doubled the amount of DNA in the cell, okay, the mitosis process basically pulls the DNA apart, okay, so that you eventually end up with equal amounts of DNA in each of the two daughter cells, as we mentioned, okay? So 46, you start with 46 chromosomes, then you double that, okay? And then you split that into two. Eventually, each of your daughter cells will have 46 chromosomes, and they will all be exactly the same as the parent cells, okay? So this is sort of how it might look like. This is just a GIF, okay? So it starts as one cell and then very quickly it becomes two. All right, another thing to know about the cell cycle is that, as you can see over here, it's sort of representative about the time, sort of. Basically, mitosis, okay, the actual cell division part, is the shortest bit of the cell cycle. Most of the cell cycle is actually in the rest of the interphase bit, okay? The cells are always dividing within us, but most of the time it's not in that actual division part. Okay, so this is how the mitosis looks like. Okay, so we start with the interphase. So as we say, interphase is not part of mitosis. Interphase and mitosis together make up the cell cycle. Okay, so that's why I put an X over here. But basically we start with interphase and the rest is mitosis. So mitosis is made up of 4 big stages: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Let's go through them really quickly. You don't have to know them super well for IGCSEs, but I have a really good way of remembering these, okay? So prophase is basically, so after in interphase, we talked about how everything doubles, replicates, you know, you've got more organelles. You know, if you had 10 mitochondria in your cell before, you're going to double that to make it 20 so that when you divide into 2, each of your daughter cells get 10 each. Okay, so basically the same thing with DNA and all that. Now, after all that, within the first mitosis, you got prophase. Prophase is basically when your chromosomes, remember your genetic material, condenses, and basically the nucleus around it, right? It's basically a sort of membrane around the nucleus, breaks down, okay? And going all around in the cell now, okay? Now, prophase starts with the letter P, so we like to say pair plus visible. This is sort of the stage where you will get to see the genetic material under a microscope. Otherwise, usually you can't really see the chromosomes, okay? Prophase is when you can usually see it best because that's when it takes up the most stain. Metaphase, okay, is basically when the chromosomes basically then line up in the middle. So M, metaphase, M for middle. Okay, they line up at the equator. That's also, if you know the Earth, right? We have something called the equator. Basically, it's like a line in the middle of the Earth as well. So we also call it that in this mitosis. Anaphase, A for away apart. As you can see in this picture, basically, it shows that after all the genetic material lines up in the center, they get pulled apart in anaphase, okay? You don't really need to know what exactly is happening just yet. And then in telophase, T for 2, basically what happens is that the nuclear envelope, remember we said that it broke down earlier? Well, now in telophase, they reform, okay? The cell hasn't divided into 2 just yet, but it is very much close to doing so. Everything's sort of happening at the same time, okay? It's not always one stage. They sort of overlap a little bit, and that's how science is like. But to make things easier to understand, we always break it up, Okay, telophase becoming 2, and then you've got your nuclear envelopes, okay, surrounding your chromosomes all over again, and you end up with 2 genetically identical daughter cells. Okay, diploid. Now, don't get too concerned over this. Basically, our human cells, most of them, okay, are mostly in the diploid state. Okay, that means that they have, as we said over here, they have 2 complete sets of chromosomes. Remember, we get 1 set from mom, 1 set from dad, so therefore we have 2 sets. Okay, diploid. You may remember di, usually di something is di something, usually means 2. Okay, this is important when we talk about meiosis later. They're somewhat similar, but a little bit different. Okay. So yeah, just know that normal cells, if you have 46 chromosomes in humans, that is, it's diploid. Okay. So this is just another illustration of what mitosis looks like. Okay, now this is where the terminology sort of comes in. You don't really need to know this, but just so you don't get too confused and hung up over it, chromosome and chromatid, this is where you can see the difference. So basically, we said in the normal cell, we start with 46 chromosomes, right? And then remember we said in interphase, there's a part where DNA replicates. Well, when it replicates, basically, it gets connected. So if you can see, for example, if we look at this light blue one over here, instead of there being 1 arm, okay, we call it arms, now there's 2 arms. So it replicated, but they're joined together. So that's why there's a terminology difference. So basically, each unit is always called a chromosome. In this case, we started with 46 chromosomes, but when it replicated, because they're still joined together, they're considered 46 chromosomes still. But chromatids is talking about the arm specifically. So in this case, you got 1 arm, but when it replicated, you've got 2 arms in 1 unit. So it's not super important to know at this stage, but basically that's why you've got 92 chromatids here. Okay? So this is just here for you guys to understand. Now, why do we do mitosis? Why do we have the cell cycle? We have cells in our body always constantly going through the entire cell cycle. Firstly, it's because of growth. As you can imagine, when you're young, you're born, you're a tiny little baby, but look at the size that you are at now, and look at the size that your parents are at now. Eventually, you're still growing at this stage, and basically, you need more and more cells to basically grow. So, yep, you need cell division in organisms. Differentiation we'll cover in a bit. And also in plants, when they grow, in order to get longer, they of course need more cells, right? You also need mitosis for cell repair and replacement. Let's say you injure yourself, you accidentally cut yourself while cooking, maybe you fell down playing football, soccer, whatever you call it. Well, you've lost cells, basically. You're not just bleeding, you've lost cells. So you need your cells to sort of divide and divide again so that you can make up, you can get your skin cells back, okay, and cover that area. Asexual reproduction. Okay, in the medical world and in the science world, basically, whenever there's the sort of A in front, usually it means no. So there is a sort of no, it means no. Okay, so asexual reproduction is when one cell basically sort of reproduces to give more cells. Okay, so like for example, in bacteria. In humans, most animals, we do sexual reproduction. Okay. Cloning as well, if you know Dolly the sheep, that was a very famous example of cloning. Okay, as you can imagine, remember we said when one parent cell goes through the entire cell cycle, you produce 2 genetically identical cells, which are also genetically identical to the original parent cell, okay? So that's basically what a clone is. It's exactly the same. So now what happens if mitosis goes wrong?